All right, let's call the February meeting of the New York State Cemetery Board to order. Just again, we're meeting remotely. I think the upgraded WebEx tells you that the meeting is being recorded when you get on, but it's being recorded. Because it's remote, we do ask everybody to identify themselves when they're speaking, each time they're speaking, so we have a record. We will have a public participation section near the end of the meeting. Make sure that you identify yourself. Tony will give you who has to do that. We appreciate your help on that, so we can have a good record. We may go to executive session. I don't think so today, but if we do, we'll reconvene to report on the executive session and then adjourn the meeting. So let me introduce the members of the board. I'm Mark Patterson, representing Secretary of State Rosanna Rosado.
I'm Jill Faber, representing Attorney General Letitia James.
Morning, I'm Tom Fuller. I'm representing Dr. Howard Zucker for the Department of Health.
Okay, and we have some staff. Louis Polshuk.
Yeah, hi. Hello.
Okay, and our counsel, Anthony Millo. All right, so again, you have the agenda, so I've been giving sort of an overview of it at the beginning of the meeting, just so it's clear as to what the day is. We're going to talk about the new rules, the rules for allowing remote meetings. Tony will spend the time on that, make sure we've got all of our I's dotted in terms of public notice. We'll then approve the minutes. We'll have a legislation, rules and regulations report by our counsel, a division report by our director. Then we'll move to the vandalism report, and that really, the vandalism applications are all we have on the agenda today. So those will each be then voted on. Again, I don't think we're going to executive session, but we would potentially vote on that and then come back out to adjourn the meeting. Tony, do you want to just review our process for participating remotely?
Sure, thanks, Mark. This meeting is being conducted pursuant to Governor's Executive Order 202.1. Pursuant to that order, Article 7 of the Public Officers Law is modified to permit any public body to meet and take action without permitting public in-person access to meetings, and to authorize such meetings to be held remotely by conference call or similar service, provided that the public has the ability to view or listen to such proceedings, and provided that such meetings are recorded and later transcribed. And as Mark indicated, this meeting is being recorded. The executive order has been interpreted to suspend the requirement that board members be physically convened or convened by video conference, and to suspend the requirement that notice of the meeting include the physical location of each board member. We've given the public notice of the meeting, how to attend by video conference or by telephone conference, and the board agenda and board material have been placed on the Division of Cemeteries website. As Mark also indicated, we are taking attendance. Giving your name and who you represent is voluntary unless you're a lobbyist. Then you must identify yourself and your client. And if you speak, we ask that you also identify yourself to the board. And that's it.
Thank you, Tony. Anybody have any questions about that? Assuming none, let's move to the next agenda item, which is approval of the minutes that we have sent out. Does anybody have any changes, corrections to the minutes as mailed?
Oh, none for me.
Tom?
The only thing I see is the very last line on page 5. You got the date for the next meeting is incorrect.
Okay.
That was it.
Well, whatever it says, it turns out it's today. So let's correct the minutes. That's ministerial. I think we can just correct the minutes, Louis, to take care of that. Okay, so I'll make a motion to approve the minutes as amended by Mr. Fuller. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Great. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
The minutes are approved. Next on our agenda is a report from our counsel, on legislation and rules and regulations.
Yeah, quite a bit of activity. We have bills that were one house that are now two house. I'll just describe them. This is there's a bill to remove the jurisdiction of the comptroller and the tax commissioner over the vandalism fund. That is now a two-house bill. There is a bill that relates to spending net appreciation. That's a two-house bill. Or spending a portion of principal, actually, replacing the net appreciation. And some other action. And then we have the chapter amendment to the merger bill was signed by the governor on January 28th. The chapter amendment to the cemetery disclosure bill was also signed by the governor on January 28th. Let's see now. We have Senate Bill 866 relating to the veteran cemetery requirements. Has seen a lot of movement. It passed the Assembly and passed the Senate. Well, no, it passed the Senate and it was delivered to the Assembly. So we're in advance to third reading in the Assembly. This is number 9 on the list. Senate 866, Assembly 1920. And then all the rest are newly introduced, but they're all previous bills that are being reintroduced. One relates to cemetery markers, the sale of cemetery markers, flags, monuments that relate to veterans. Another is relating to this applicability of sales tax to cemeteries. Another relates to the crime of cemetery desecration. There's a bill relating to the anti-combination law that would permit grandfathered funeral homes to be transferred to a new owner, have the equipment increase capacity, and to relocate. There's a bill which relates to the disposition of cremated remains that have been unclaimed for 120 days or more in the possession of a funeral home. And there's a bill relating to the social service law reimbursement for financial assistance for burial and cremation. It increases the amount. So those are all reintroduced from last session. And that's it.
Thank you, Tony. Does any board members have any questions on Tony's legislation report?
No.
Thank you. Okay, and I'm assuming that Lewis will update us on the regulations, or Tony, do you want to start that?
Yeah, I can just give a little bit. In addition to meeting the cemetery board's objectives, the draft regulation goes through internal review at the Department of State, and that's where it has been. I believe it's now making its way past that review. So we are seeing progress, even though there hasn't been anything happening in front of the board, but behind the scenes there's been progress.
And we are hopeful to bring the finalized draft regulations for the board's review for the March meeting, and the next step for that would be to go through the rulemaking process. So again, that was around issues of abandonment and consolidation that were part of a bill that the governor vetoed, but directed the cemetery board to see if there are ways we could solve some of those issues through regulatory action. And we've also added a clarifier on the issue around multiple bids as a draft. So hopefully we'll be able to bring that back to you next month. Great. Any other questions for Tony from the members of the board? None?
I just have a quick question at number 15 about the scattering of cremains at 120 days. I assume the cemetery that accepts those cremains will be allowed to charge for that service?
I
Does the
recall the
bill-
bill saying anything on that, so I would assume so. I'm sure Division would have a position on that. I'm not going to speak for them, but I don't recall the bill addressing that.
Okay, yeah, I was just curious because if there is a charge and these are unclaimed remains, would that be a charge for the funeral home, or would the funeral home be able to pass that on to the family eventually, or how would that work? But if it's not addressed there, I guess it'll be ironed out at a later date.
Well,
Unless Lewis has an idea about how that's going to play out.
The thing is, scattering unclaimed remains is charging for that's a bit of a dicey proposition, because if they're unclaimed, the person is likely not to have any pre-existing or continuing relationship with the cemetery. So while if it remains of someone who has some other nexus to the cemetery, they own a lot or what have you, I suppose they could charge for it. Charging for it for people who are cremated there on a one-off thing is not likely to result in any collection, and I can't imagine any cemetery actually taking a family to small claims to try to recover such a sum. In fact, that would be crazy.
Right.
okay.
Great, thank you.
Oh, Tony, I have a question about the proposed amendment to the anti-combination law. Do you know if the proposed changes would assume that the new entity is keeping it has to stay within the physical confines of where the operation is, or can it be transferred to a new owner at a new location? Is that spoken to at all in the proposal?
It does permit the crematory to be moved, and that permission to move the crematory actually doesn't hinge on there being a change in control of the funeral home. It could be moved at any time. So I don't see why it couldn't also be moved at the time that the funeral home changes hands. Basically, this legislation would undo the three interpretations that the cemetery board had in 1 year that are posted on our website about how to interpret the anti-combo law. So, yeah, that's definitely one of the things that it addresses is the crematory can be relocated.
It can be relocated, new ownership. Okay.
And expand.
And it can be expanded.
And expanded. Yep.
Okay.
That's my understanding.
Yep.
Okay, good questions. Any other questions? I don't want to rush anybody on this. Okay, well, we will, of course, the division will keep an eye on that. Our council keep an eye on those pending bills and keep the board apprised of what's happening with them. The next on our agenda is the division report. Lewis, do you have things that you'd like to bring to the board's attention?
Sure. First, I guess I'll update everyone on cremation statistics. These are as of Friday. The volume of cremations seems to have come down a little bit. A little hard to tell. This is not, we're not doing complex statistical analysis on this, but the volume is pretty much steady across the board. There are some, I would say, relatively minor delays in New York City. The scheduled crematories are the 3 New York City crematories are on average scheduling cremations out 4 days as of Friday. There is Greenwood in Brooklyn doesn't seem to have any real delays to speak of, if you call them, and there's a fair amount of capacity in Long Island and the Hudson, the lower part of the Mid-Hudson. So there shouldn't be any issue with getting a rapid cremation done within the state, no matter where you are in the state. There did seem to be a slight uptick in cases in cremations in Western New York. Of course, Western New York has probably the most cremation capacity of any place in the state. Beyond that, our annual report's due in March. Alicia will give us the statistics, but they're continuing to come in. We got our annual report mailing out right around the time of the previous meeting, which is a good thing. And that's, so now that the legislature has passed the chapter amendment to the cemetery disclosure bill, we have until sometime in June, I believe, to develop the cemetery disclosures. I've got a working first draft that I'm working with. I shared it with the division. I got a bunch of comments on it. I was doing revisions right before this meeting. Hopefully this will go to council sometime pretty soon. We will be way ahead. We'd like to get these done way ahead of the statutory deadline for having them, because the cemeteries have to be able to post them. I know NYSAC was talking about having some type of QR code that you could scan and it would point you to the website, as opposed to actually having to deal with paper. They probably would need some lead time to be able to develop that. So I want to get these up there well in advance of our deadline, but we've been working our way through those.
Okay, anything else to report, Louis?
Nope.
Okay, so I think Alicia is going to give us the vandalism report.
Yes.
Oh, sorry, Mark, there is one scheduling matter I don't know if you want to take this up at the end or you want to take this up now.
It's an open
Let's
question.
take it up at the end.
What are you talking about?
Let's take it up at the end. The possibility of an additional meeting this month. Let's take that up at the end.
Yep, okay. Go ahead, Alicia.
Okay, so calendar year 2021, we've collected vandalism fees of $54,163. Assessment collections are $27,260. Fiscal year from April 1st, 2020, our vandalism $128,858, and assessment is $72,010. Of the $2 million of the 2020-21 vandalism fund appropriation, $103,489.40 was paid on outstanding vouchers for applications approved in 2018-19 fiscal year. $304,447.28 was paid on outstanding vouchers for applications approved in the 2019-20 fiscal year. And $238,768.42 was paid on vouchers for the current fiscal year. Vouchers previously approved applications totaling $438,199.33 have been processed by the DOS fiscal office and are pending payment. There remains $453,312.92 of funds committed for prior year's applications, and $272,246.08 committed for applications that are approved in the current fiscal year. There's a little over $600,000 available for future applications, of which $473,182.10 is on the agenda for this meeting, February 9th, 2021. There are 6 applications in the pipeline totaling $174,755.41. This all leaves us on track to spend most of the $2 million 2020-2021 appropriation. There are 8 applications before the board today, 7 hazardous monument applications, 1 abandonment application.
Wow, that was a very thorough report, Alicia. Thank you. Does anybody have any questions for Alicia on that report?
No.
Okay. Let's dive into those 8 applications, which is what our agenda is comprised of. I think I'm going to take. I think this is the order that they're on the agenda, but Cato Union Cemetery. These are all dangerous monument applications, except for the last one. Dangerous Cato Union Cemetery in Cayuga County in the amount of $36,206.15 is their a report on that? Anything to briefly tell us about it? Yeah.
This is Mike Seelman from Division of Cemeteries. Cato Union is put in for repair of 28 hazardous monuments. I inspected them. They did appear to be hazardous. And I recommended the approval and $36,206.15. I have nothing more to add on that.
That's great. Tony, did you have any comments?
No concerns on this one.
Okay, so I'll make a motion to approve the application of Cato Union Cemetery in Cayuga County for $36,206.15 for repair of dangerous monuments. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Tom. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you. Second application for a dangerous monument is Green Ridge Cemetery in Saratoga County in the amount of $28,383.30. Is there a report on that?
Yes, this is Len Breen from the Division of Cemeteries. This is for 43 monuments, hazardous monument repair at Green Ridge in the city of Saratoga Springs. I visited the cemetery and did verify that all 43 monuments under application do appear to be dangerous, leaning, and danger of tipping on their foundations, and do recommend approval for this application.
Okay, and Tony, do you have any issues around the Green Ridge application?
I do think, this is an unusual application in that one of the bidders, in fact, the low bidder proposes capping the foundations, which there's a significant price difference between the low bidder and the other bid. I think that merits some discussion from division.
Yes, that's why when I first received this application, I did reach out to the cemetery because of the discrepancy. The McPhee estimate was for more than double of the Pickett estimate. So I asked them to reach out to McPhee to see if they would adjust their estimate to coincide with the Pickett, and that Pickett, in their proposal, he proposes to cap a portion of the monuments, and whereas McPhee proposes to pour foundations for all 43 monuments. And the cemetery reached out. They attempted to contact McPhee at least twice, and they didn't respond. So I submitted the application as is, considering that Pickett has done previous work in the cemetery to the satisfaction of the cemetery. They've done good work in the past. So based on that, and the numbers coincide with previous estimates for other applications. So that's why I submitted as is.
And Len, you guys in division don't have any issue with or concern with the process that's going to be used of capping rather than pouring new foundations?
No, because Pickett, he uses this method on nearly all of his work that he's done in other cemeteries, and particularly at Green Ridge, he's used this. And I have inspected his work, and the cemetery is inspected. The cemetery is inspected, and they have observed him in the process of pouring these caps. And they, all of the work that he's done is held up very well, and I don't have any problem with the work that he's done. The cemetery is very satisfied, so I don't see an issue with this.
This is Mike Seelman. I'd like to add that Pickett looked at the monuments and made a determination on the foundations. There's a total of 43 monuments that appear to be hazardous. It's not a case where he's gonna just cap everything as a cost saving issue. He looked at each one, determined that he could safely and properly cap 20 of the foundations, and he will also be replacing 23 3 of the foundation. So he's only capping where it's appropriate. And like Len said, we've seen this in the past, and it appears appropriate to us.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions in terms of this application?
Yeah, just a quick question. That was the only concerns what Tony brought up. I noticed it was the lower bid was only 44% of the other one, but I've never heard of the term capping. What exactly is that? Is that pouring a foundation on top of the existing foundation? How does that work exactly?
Well, it's not pouring on top of foundation. A lot of these older monuments, the very one older than like 50 years plus, they didn't pour foundations in the old days. They would maybe use field stone, gravel, old stone, and they would dig down and fill the hole with that, and then place the monuments on top of the old field stone. So that's rather than remove all of the existing gravel or field stone, whatever they happen to use, they would just secure it with rebar and then pour a concrete cap over the top of that and level it out and then place the monument on top.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, he explains it pretty well, probably better than I can. And Pierre from Pickett, in his narrative, I included with the application. He goes into more detail than probably he could explain it better than I if you wanted to read. That's included in the application. He goes into depth in how he goes about the process.
All right. Thank you.
Great.
Sure.
Any other questions for the division? If not, I'll make a motion to approve the application from Green Ridge Cemetery in Saratoga County in the amount of $28,383.30. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Next one is Trumbull's Corners Rural Cemetery in Tompkins County in the amount of $27,494.32 for hazardous monuments. Is there a presentation on that?
Trumbull's Corners.
Brendan Sand with the Division of Cemeteries. Trumbull's Corners. It's a small cemetery in Tompkins County. Visited out there, noted the monuments. They went through the application process. Pretty straightforward foundation replacements. They did get the 2 estimates. They published the notice, and it looks like a good application. And therefore, I've recommended approval for the full $27,494.32.
Thank you, Brendan. Tony, did you have any comments?
Oh, no concerns on this one.
Okay. Any other questions from the board about the application?
No.
All right, I'll make a
No.
motion to approve the application of Trumbull's Corners Rural Cemetery in the county of Tompkins in the amount for hazardous monuments in the amount of $27,494.32. Remind me to say subject to approval or available funds. I'll do that again at the end. So, do I have a second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries for Trumbull's Corners Rural Cemetery. We have, the next is New Forest Cemetery in Oneida County in the amount of $52,579.95. It's a hazardous monuments application. Does the division have a overview?
This is Mike Seelman. New Forest Cemetery has an application to repair 30 hazardous monuments. I went out and inspected the monuments, and they're all rather large monuments, and they're on a terraced hillside. Most of New Forest Cemetery is hillside. The interesting thing about this application is they had I think in 2018, they were approved for a previous hazardous monument application. It took a while for the work to be done, but Burdick Monument actually finished that up earlier this year. The cemetery has been reorganized recently, and they have a very active board and capable staff now. And they made the determination that they wanted to do the repairs. They watched the repairs that were done by Burdick. They've also been doing these types of repairs for monuments that haven't been included in this, monuments that have actually fallen. They have an approved charge for installing foundations. So they put in the low bid. They got 3 additional bids. I looked at the averages of the prices, and they range from $2,335 is the high to $1,749 is the low. I believe that the cemetery has the ability, because I've seen the work that they've done on monuments like this in the past, and therefore I recommended approval.
Thank you. Tony, did you have any comments on this application?
Yeah, on this one I do. Because New Forest is the low bidder, the cemetery itself is the low bidder. I'm worried that, where the cemetery itself is the low bidder, if that keeps happening, it could accelerate situations where no one else wants to bid on these things. If the cemetery keeps underbidding other entities, why should they keep offering bids? So one of the questions I have, and maybe Mike can answer to this, is when the cemetery is going to be one of the bidders, do we protect against the cemetery receiving all the bids and then intentionally low bidding between all the other received bids? Do we make sure that we get the cemetery's bid first before the other bids come in to make sure the other bidders are being given a fair chance?
I had a discussion with the cemetery board when they first said that they were planning on submitting a bid. And I guess that was my concern too, that if you wait for all the bids to come in and then you just go $100 lower, well, that doesn't seem like it's competitive, really. And exactly what you said, it's going to dissuade them from bidding in the future. In this instance, I think 2 of the monument dealers were well aware that the cemetery was bidding. Beyond that, I don't know of any safeguard. I don't know what the time frame was for the cemetery coming up with their bid. I do know that the cemetery based their foundation charge on their approved charge. I'll also say that the let's see, I think it's a Northeast Cemetery Services estimate was very similar to what it was the last time it was bid in 2018. So I think they have a formula, and they just use the formula, and wherever it ends up, it ends up. But I don't have any, definitive statement on what the bidding process was.
Well, just a question. We don't approve the vendor, whether it's the cemetery or not. We approve the amount. And so in one sense, that is a market process of, if the other folks want to be competitive, they'll have to be competitive. The cemetery is free to have other people do the work. If they don't want to do it, it's just held to this amount. Am I correct about that?
Yes, you are correct about that.
Well, the thing there, though, Mark, is that, clearly New Forest Cemetery wants the work. That's why they're bidding on it. They're not bidding on it to make sure that the price is a low price. So that's, if the board approves this at New Forest Cemetery's price, New Forest Cemetery is going to do the work. I have no doubt that that's the result.
But
So,
again, it
sorry.
doesn't mean it's not competitive. And again, the other assumption you have is they wait till the bids come in and do it lower. I don't know quite what the rules would be. I don't know that that would be proper, but I'm not sure what we would do about it.
Can I ask you a question? Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Jill.
It's really a background question. How common is this that cemeteries have their own in-house crew that undertakes to do these repairs? I mean, is this an isolated situation, or is this frequent that there are in-house bids and outside contractor bids?
It's not, it's certainly more common to have contractors do it. However, New Forest is it's a large urban full service cemetery. They do have a charge for installing foundations, so they do this type of work.
Large cemeteries typically do bid on their own jobs. Oakwood in Troy will bid for, if I remember right, the foundation work, but not actually setting the stones. Forest Lawn will bid, I think, for the whole job. There are a couple of other large ones that do themselves bid. More commonly, they don't.
So actually, what Louis just said was another point I was going to get to, which is, so we do have cemeteries that do foundation work and have an approved charge for that. Not all of them do, but a good number do. And that's typically where we see the cemetery bidding because they have an approved charge for foundation. Should we be limiting cemeteries to just bidding on the foundation work and make them seek independent bids on the monument work, removing the monument, laying it down, and then putting it back in and sealing it to the new foundation? That's not an approved charge for cemeteries. The foundation work is. So we could at least have certainty of competitive bids with regard to the monument portion of the work. And with the foundation work, anyone who's going to bid against the foundation work knows will be able to know what the cemetery's charge is going to be because that's an approved charge. So,
so of course,
that's something to consider.
Of course, the flip side of this is that the cemeteries this work is being done with our money. And while I understand where you're coming from, it's a little anomalous for the state to be saying, do not participate in this aspect of it, do not profit from it. Oh, and by the way, it's going to cost us more because of that. It's going to cost the taxpayers more.
Except in the end run, if other entities don't bid, and the cemetery itself is the only bidder, that's going to really end up costing us more. A lot of, virtually every section of law that requires competitive bids for state money has an anti-collusion provision. I'm not saying that there's collusion going on. It depends, I guess, on how you define collusion. If the cemetery is receiving bids and then intentionally making itself the low bidder, I think that would violate a lot of state laws where there are those kind of provisions. The cemetery shouldn't be bidding, making its bid knowing what the other bids are. And anything we can do to ensure the competitiveness of going forward I think, is a benefit to the state and the protection of the state funds.
Well, I would suggest you raise a policy question. It's not necessarily, this is the sort of moment, but not necessarily relative to this particular application because we haven't had that conversation before. Unless the board thinks otherwise, I would recommend that we send that back to the division for discussion, but we look at the application on its merits as it is.
No, I agree with you, Mark. I think, for this, for the purposes of approving this request, I think you're right. We look at the face of the application, but I do think a discussion would be good for the reasons that that Tony brought up, because inherent in asking that competitive bids are sought is that we think it's a good thing that there are a number of bids and that there's a process of selecting among those bids. And without even talking about collusion, assuming there's no collusion, it is incongruous if the cemetery is able by submitting a slightly lower bid to always be the one. Then you really are defeating the purpose of whatever the intent of having those other bids as a requirement. So I think for the purposes of this transaction, you're right. It is what it is. I don't think there's anything inappropriate. However, I do think a discussion
Sure.
About this nuance makes sense.
We can ask the division to bring it back. Okay.
Something I just looked back. The cemetery bid is dated December 23rd. The next highest bid is not dated at all. The next highest bid is dated December 22nd. And then the next highest bid is dated December 29th. So it appears that, these things all came in about the same time. It's not clear that the cemetery made the bid after they received all the other bids, simply based on
Actually, it's clear
the
they
dates.
did, based on what you're saying.
Yes.
Okay, well, that's helpful information too. I would, given that conversation though, make a motion. We approve. Tony, I'm sorry. Were there other issues that you wanted to raise?
No, that was it. And I wasn't making the point that this proposal should be denied because there were 3 other bids here. As Jill pointed out, this is something we ought to discuss though going forward.
Okay. That's what I said too. All right, so I'll make a motion that the New Forest Cemetery, the application by New Forest Cemetery in Oneida County in the amount of $52,579.95 be approved. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. The application is approved subject to the availability of funds. Next application is from Forest Lawn in Erie County. Forest Lawn Review, a hazardous application in the amount of $55,070.50. Is there a division report on that?
Mike?
Yes, this Forest Lawn Cemetery is put in for repair of 70 monuments. There's actually 3 applications from the Forest Lawn group before the board today. This is the first, and they all have a similarity in that the Cindy Craig went out, looked at each of the monuments. In this case, at Forest Lawn, there was 70 monuments that she determined to be appear to be hazardous. In this case, they have a bid from Western New York Cemetery Services and a bid from Forest Lawn Cemetery itself. Again, Forest Lawn has the ability to do these repairs. They have a full service crew. The thing that we noted was an employee at Forest Lawn was formerly affiliated with Western New York Cemetery Services, and his close relatives still own that company. So we requested that they do a little bit more work as far as trying to get bids, and they did. They posted an ad basically soliciting bids from monument dealers in the area. And they also directly called 3 monument dealers that have bid other jobs in the area. Still, Western New York Cemetery Services is the low bidder at $66,110. It's an average of $944 per monument, which is actually pretty low. And therefore, I recommended approval of this.
What was the amount, Michael?
The total amount is $66,335, and that includes
That's the, okay. So that's,
yeah, the bid and the news article.
okay.
Yeah,
So
let
I
me-
have
let
down
me-
on my agenda, Lakeview, St. Matthews, and with 3 different amounts. Are they all essentially the same, issues the same? Could we approve all of them at once? Is that, or Tony, what do you think about that?
Yeah, actually, I'm going to speak on all 3 as one. It's one cemetery corporation, Buffalo City Cemetery. But I'm going to be asking the board to table because I think we need more work here.
And you have a reason for that, or?
Yeah, the process here is problematic. So as Mike indicated, this was first almost presented to the board last month when it was came up last month. The cemetery had not reached out to anyone other than this Western New York company, which is operated by the family of one of its employees, Mr. Walcott. And so you had the cemetery and a company run by the cemetery's employee as the only 2 bidders. That was problematic. That can certainly lead to collusion and kickbacks and all kinds of unsavory things. So it was not presented to the board last month so that more bids could be received. The cemetery, instead of calling other bidders, put an ad. And then this was sent out to the board on February 2nd. And then on February 4th, 2 days later, after the board packet went out, the cemetery called 3 other entities. First dealing with the ad, well, when I received the update on actually on Friday from the division that explained the whole process, I made some phone calls. It just didn't seem time to ask division to follow up. So, a number of the monument dealers in that area said they don't look at the ads. They don't get work from ads. It's not how they get work. So it looked like, putting out an ad was a method of obtaining bids that was destined to fail. And so the only real concrete effort to receive other bids were the 3 phone calls on February 4th. I called those 3 entities and they said none of them do foundation work, which is a big part of bidding. So they didn't bid. They just were called on Thursday and they all told whoever called, thanks, but no thanks. I think there are other entities that are able to do foundation work that would provide a competitive bid. If Buffalo looks anything like Albany right now, there's a lot of snow on the ground, a lot more coming down. I don't believe that this work's going to be done in February, and that a delay to next month isn't going to actually delay the work because it's not going to happen between now and the next meeting. And if we can actually get independent bids from a company that isn't run by one of Buffalo City Cemetery's employees, we might get a reduction in the actual lowest bid. So, I would like to see this adjourned to next month. I can give the division the information I've gathered of who might be interested in submitting a bid that would compete with these 2 bids. And hopefully next month, we can have an alternative to what's in front of us.
It may require a special board meeting because we need to try to maximize our expenditures. I know Joe Dispenza is on the line, or at least I saw him. does the cemetery want to speak to any of these issues to inform the board?
Mark, if I may first,
Yes?
the cemetery did exactly what we asked them to do. Whether the board wants to now ask them to do more, that's fine. But the idea of putting an ad out there is an idea that we gave them. And we specifically asked that someone other than the employee whose relatives run this other company make the calls to the other monument companies, and that also happened. So while obviously the board's free to consider whether we should ask them to do even more, I don't think it's fair to fault the cemetery for doing exactly what we asked them to do.
Thank you. Right. So first, let me just see if there's anybody in the cemetery who would like to speak to the issue before us. Joe or David or whoever might be the right advocate. I can't tell who's on the line, but okay. So,
Mark, it looks to me like Mr. Dispenza dropped off. I don't see his name on the list of participants.
I saw it earlier, but I don't see it now. So, again, I'll offer the cemetery one chance to speak to the board on the issues that have been raised. If they're not available, then I'll go back to the board discussion. Again, I don't know, Tony, do you think that the cemetery has complied with the law and you're trying to get a better result, or is it insufficient in your view?
I think the process that's been done leaves that an open question. I can't say that they haven't. I can't say that they have. The only bid other than the cemetery's bid that the board has in front of it is from a company that the cemetery's employee operates. That was a problem last month. It's still a problem this month. The only 3 entities they actually contacted, none of them do foundation work, so they didn't bid. The whole purpose of delaying things a month was to get an actual 3rd bid. That hasn't been achieved yet. And I think it can be achieved based on the phone calls I've made, that there is at least one entity out there that, they said they're happy to bid on this. And so there may even be more than that. But I'm confident that if we come back in a month, we'll have another bid.
Well, again, I don't think it'll be a month. We can't, well, maybe we can. We need to make sure that we get the bids in time to process, if they're approved, process them within this fiscal year. But so I'll just turn it over to the other board members to ask questions or make comments. I'll start.
Mark, I want to just add one more thing. When this first came before us, we also did a calculation, and the bid. So 2 more things. Sorry. Number one, the cemetery's employee does not work for this other corporation. It is his family that he formerly did, and his family now does. So it's an issue, but he doesn't actually work for the corporation. That's just a little clarification. Number 2 is Mike also did a calculation, and the low bid here was within the range of what we normally see for bids A, for work in Western New York, and B, from this corporation. It's not like this guy was charging them more than he charges unrelated entities or anything like that. Again, the board may want to require more, but I want to be clear that we also have that information before us.
Okay, Liz, thank you. Again, I'll turn it over to the board members to ask questions or make statements. Jill, do you want to start?
The only question I have is as it relates to what type of disclosure and discussion there was among the board, given that that this bid, was made by an entity where, there is, some connection with the staff of the cemetery. Was that discussed? Was that disclosed? Is that reflected in minutes? Did they take that into account when they were considering that bid?
Louis, do you have any,
Yeah.
or Mike, do you have any comment on that?
We don't generally get minutes on this type of application. That said, Mike, anything to add?
I don't specifically have anything to add other than what Louis said earlier, that we compiled the last 10 applications in Western New York and compared them, the average price to these. And, these appeared to be the low prices. I would also add that the 2 of the 3 monument dealers I am familiar with. I was not aware that they didn't do foundations, as Tony said. No, I don't have any other comment on this.
Yeah.
Mike,
And I guess the other.
2 other.
Louis,
Mike,
Louis, wait for Joe, please.
Oh, sorry. No, I just one more question, and more of a comment. I think what we're talking about here again really is, maybe process versus substance. If we're talking about, where does this bid fall within other bids that you've seen from them in Western New York, and would we feel comfortable that if we approve it, this is an appropriate amount? I think that's one thing, but I think the other thing that's important is what Tony raised, which is the point of getting the other bids is so that there is a competitive process. And if it seems like things were rushed and there wasn't an opportunity to get bids from other entities that do foundation work, then that doesn't really serve the purpose of getting other bids. Again, not that there was an intention to, purposely look at entities who are going to decline to bid, but I do think that if we're going to make sure that the process and the reasons why other bids need to be sought is followed, the process here doesn't seem to satisfy that.
Well,
I just want to add to that. The total of the 3 bids, it is one cemetery corporation. We're talking about $170,000 when you add up all 3. That's a big chunk of change for hazardous monuments. It's a big chunk of change to come out of the vandalism fund, and you're right, Jill, that if the cemetery was spending its own money, we would certainly expect the cemetery's board to review and approve and make sure that this is an unrelated party transaction, that the conflict of interest laws are complied with. It shouldn't do any less just because it's getting reimbursed by the state.
Right.
I don't know if Tom, if you have any comments.
I do. I agree with Louis that they probably did everything we asked them to do, but I also agree with Tony that given the time of year and the fact that we need more information, that waiting another month would not be inappropriate here.
I don't support the motion to table. I think that they have done what we asked. I think they've done what's legal, and I think the price is determined to be relatively consistent with prices in the region. I think the division's probably got a good handle on that. But I would like to move, even though the work won't get done, I'd like to move it for other reasons. So if someone, I'll make a motion to table. I won't support it, but I'll make a motion to table and see if there's a second.
Mark, can I just make a suggestion here? There are 2 separate issues. There are 2 separate issues going on here. One is, as Jill points out, this is in fact a related party transaction. At least I think it is. I mean, if arguably you've got a company owned by the wife and kids of an employee, assuming we treat that as a related party transaction, we would want to see board minutes showing compliance with the related party provisions of the statute. That's something that we should generally require. That's something that I think is a reasonable ask. Then there's the question of whether we know better than they do which monument dealers to call in Western New York. Are we going to specify the ones that they have to call? Are we going to say, well, these ones weren't good enough for this, that, and the other reason? Are we going to start calling? Monument dealers to try to drum up business? We have been told in no uncertain terms by our Bureau of Fiscal Management, do not ever talk to monument dealers. They don't want us talking to them because they say that it messes up. It could create contractual issues between us and the monument dealer, which is something that we have strenuously tried to avoid through this. So if your goal is to table this so that they can demonstrate compliance with the related party provisions, I have no problem with that. But I have a major problem with us being directly in touch with any monument dealers or suggesting to them which monument dealers they need to call.
Well, I don't think anyone's suggesting that, though, Louis. I mean, at least what I was saying is that there was a very condensed process here, because, you know, it wasn't compliant when they were preparing to bring it to us the first time. And so there was, you know, suggestion by the division of, you know, how to maybe get the bids more quickly. I think in this particular case, is it clear to folks, you know, in the cemetery world, you know, which companies do foundation work and which don't? It seems that, you know, by putting an ad, maybe you weren't reaching, you know, but that aside, I don't think that it's, we're talking about the division doing the work of identifying contractors, but at its heart, the related party transaction concern is what I think requires tabling this.
Okay, Jill, the other issue is I don't agree with you that this was a quote unquote condensed process. We told them about a month ago what they needed to do. They held off on making the calls until they advertised for the work at our suggestion. It's not like they wanted to do this. They had ample time to do it.
Well, that's what I'm saying. It was condensed, not because the division didn't do everything it could to you know, give them an opportunity. It was condensed by whatever their own timetable was.
Why wasn't the calls made before the packet went out to the board? I mean, the packet went out February 2nd. They made the calls February 4th, just this past Thursday, and then we didn't receive the update from the division that occurred until Friday, the day before the weekend preceding this meeting. That is condensed. That doesn't look like it gives everybody a fair chance to really, a division itself to absorb the information and process it.
Okay, so I think you're kind of mixing two issues here. To the extent your issue is that we didn't share this with the board farther in advance, that's a fair point, and I'll take responsibility for that. To the extent you're saying that the cemetery gave us a rush job on this, I don't buy that at all. The cemetery originally was only going to wait a week after it ran the ads and say we got nothing. I said, no, that's not good enough. Give it another week. They then made the calls after they got no responses, because if they'd gotten solicitations from that ad, why the heck would they be making calls?
I'll entertain a motion from one of the board members as to what they want to do.
So I think, and I think that's significant information, Louis, and that does help clarify the timetable to, you know, everything getting before the board. But I think that this should be tabled so that the cemetery can provide us with the information we need to determine whether they went through the processes they need to in accepting this bid from our related party.
Okay, so there's a motion. There's a motion on the floor for to table the three applications from Forest Lawn. I'm taking that we're doing this for all three for purposes of establishing that they have followed the related party transaction procedures. Is that what you have, Jill? Is that your motion?
That'd be my suggestion, yes.
Okay, so your motion, do you have a second? Do we have a second for that motion?
I will second that.
Okay. All in favor of that of that motion?
Aye.
Aye.
Nay, but the motion carries. So the motion to table is approved, and we will bring that back to the board. The last application is Grandview, it's an abandonment application for Grandview Cemetery by the town of Whitestone in Oneida County for the amount of $153,820.48. Is there a presentation on that?
This is Mike Seelman. The town, or it's Grandview Cemetery in Oneida County, held an emergency lot owners meeting in 2016. Former associate accountant Joe Ambrose and I attended that meeting. It was at the, there's a small chapel at the cemetery. It had been advertised. They were looking for lot owners and to reconstitute a board. And it was a very well-attended meeting. The town's supervisor was there. The town attorney was there. They had the current board of the cemetery was there. And the reason for the meeting was that the superintendent and treasurer, who was basically doing everything at the cemetery, was stepping down. And we had a long discussion about continued operation of the cemetery without this person fulfilling the role. At the end of that meeting, the board of the cemetery voted unanimously to I want to say abandon the cemetery, but we've had this discussion. At that time, it was understood that the proper process when they couldn't go on was to convey it to the town. As I said, the town supervisor, Sean Coletta, was present at the meeting. He addressed the people and said that the town did not want the cemetery. He was concerned that the town would not be able to provide the level of maintenance that the lot owners had become accustomed to, and offered to assist in any way short of taking over the cemetery. But in the end, the trustees determined that they did not want to continue operating the cemetery. So they signed resolutions to convey it to the town. I want to reiterate that the understanding was from the town's side that the proper method to provide maintenance was to accept the conveyance. And that's the reason that they did that. We fast forward, at the time the town received $94,000, which the town had thought was perpetual care funds. We've since reviewed that and determined that it's permanent maintenance funds. The town's been providing maintenance of the cemetery. They've continued to do burials. They put in this application originally requesting $198,322. I went out and met with the town supervisor, the highway superintendent, and the parks commissioner. And we walked through the cemetery, and I looked at the things that they had requested, made some suggestions, let them know that I was not going to recommend payment in the full amount and why. And I'll go through the things that they requested. Specifically, they wanted equipment. My original concern was it was not at the OGS price. They went back and they provided an invoice from Granger Equipment and indicated that that is at the OGS price. They're looking for mowers, trimmers, blowers, and a chainsaw. I recommended approval for the equipment, the amount of $18,078.40. They submitted a request for $113,000 for paving. They wanted to add a road in their, I don't want to say newly developed, but it's the section that they are selling most of the graves in, and that has most of the recent burials. I looked at that area, and it's a sod pathway. And I let them know that generally an improvement like turning a sod pathway into a paved road is not what the board considers part of maintenance, and it would likely not be approved. There was another section of the road that was in very good shape. And I questioned why would they want to repave the section of road that was in such good shape. So we more or less prorated that. We measured the area and basically prorated the estimate based on one section of that road that was in poor shape, that was broken up and clearly did need repair. So my recommendation is for approving the repaving of 2 roads completely that needed it, one section of an existing road and a small section of another road. I did not recommend, installing a road on the side pathway. And that was my recommendations for $68,742. While we were there was something that was not included in the original application was there's retaining walls along the sides of 2 of these roads that they're going to repave, that need to be repaved. And the retaining walls are crumbling. So they put in an estimate from Rob Warney Masonry for $60,000. There are several areas throughout the cemetery that have retaining walls that are going to be either removed and replaced or patched. They also have a series of concrete steps, walkways up these terraced hillsides that are in very poor shape, and they were going to be either patched or replaced. Also, the main apron at the entrance to the cemetery is concrete, and that's broken up, and it's a very rough entrance from the street to the cemetery, and that would be included. Also, when I was there, I noted several trees. They have large pine trees that are actually dead, and they could fall in the cemetery or fall across the road. And the lower road has several trees that are kind of leaning over it that they want to either trim back or remove. And that's $7,000 for tree work. So all in all, I recommended approval of $153,820.40.
Mike, let me just summarize that you're recommending approval on the basis that you believe it was an abandonment despite the sort of fuzzy process, and based on your review of the funds, both additions and subtractions. Is that right?
That is correct.
Okay. So if there's nothing else, Tony, do you have any?
To clarify further, the abandonment was because at this meeting, they were unable to secure 3 people willing to continue to serve as board members.
Yeah. Your view is that it was an abandonment. Yes. So Tony, do you have any questions or concerns or comments?
Yeah, on the issue of abandonment, I think there's enough there based on, what this board has proved previously, even though there were agreements that this is similar to other situations where the board has found that it was an abandonment. In fact, there might be even a little more here supporting the finding that this was an abandonment than in some previous matters that came to the board. I'll note that this is an ongoing operation, and the application does have certification regard to funds received and current funds. I believe they received $94,000 when it was abandoned, and I think there's about $104,000 now. So they are receiving income and spending money on the cemetery. My only question is for Mike. These adjustments that you've proposed, is the town okay with that? Have you discussed that with them and they're good with that being the figure presented to the board?
Yes, I did make the town aware of what I was recommending, and they agreed with it. For instance, the prorating of road number 1, that was the highway superintendent's idea. Let's, we're looking at, I think, 1,300 feet of road. Let's measure the bad section. And so they are aware, yes.
Okay, so yeah, that being said, I have no concerns on this one.
Thank you, Tony. Are there any other questions of the division or of council on this? If there are none, I'll
None from me.
Yes, you okay? Jill?
Yeah, no questions, no.
So I'll make a motion to approve the application for abandonment funds by the town of Whitestone in Oneida County for Grandview Cemetery in the amount of $150,000, $820.40, subject to the availability of funding. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, good. Motion to approve. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. The application is approved. Just remind, hope that, I don't know if I need it, but just, don't think I said subject to the availability of funds, but that is on all of those applications, but they're all subject to the availability of funds. So we have no other applications, no other business before the board. The next meeting date, I think, is March 9th, unless we need to schedule a special board meeting to get some of these vandalism applications before the board in time for the end of the fiscal year, in which case we will try, I think you said March or February 26th, Bruce? What did you say?
I had said February 23rd.
23rd,
I'm willing
sorry.
to go, which is 2 weeks from today. I'm willing to go a little bit later than that if we think that'll give us a little more breathing room. I mean, I generally don't have any meetings scheduled on Fridays. So if you wanted to go for the 26th, that would be fine by me. It would give us a little bit more time.
I said the 26th out of memory.
No, I know, but that would actually give us a little more time.
So we have to check people's calendars. I'm just alerting you to that. We will work out, if we need to do it, we'll work out a date which all of you can participate, all the other board members. But I'm just sort of giving you a heads up that we might need to do that. Is that sufficient?
I mean, I think in light of the tabling Forest Lawn, we are going to need to do that, because if that's going to get approved, we're going to need to give fiscal a little bit more time for a large application.
Okay, so we are likely to have a special board meeting. If you want to set the date right now.
Yeah, I'm proposing. I'm going with you. I'm proposing February 26th.
Okay, and can the other board members look at your calendar? I don't have any idea. What mine is, to be honest with you.
Any particular time or
10:30.
the same time? Okay.
Easy to remember.
Yeah, it's fine. It's fine for me.
Okay, which date are we talking about? The 23rd or the 25th?
26th, Friday, February 26th.
Oh, Friday. Okay.
Yes.
Let me check here real quick. Yeah, I'm clear for the 26th.
Okay, well then let's schedule at least a special board meeting for Friday, February 26th at 10:30. We will send out notices confirming that. Also, the next regularly scheduled board meeting, I think, is March 9th. Is that right?
Yep, correct.
Right, okay, so that would be the next opportunity, and we'll confirm. I think we've already scheduled the 9th. We'll confirm all of that. If there's nothing else for the board, then I open this up to the public. Anybody wishing to speak to the board on matters that have been before us or otherwise? Is anybody looking to speak to the board?
Well, if no one else will,
Oh, I'm so relieved. I was going to tear the fabric of the universe. You didn't come back.
good morning. David Fleming, representing the New York State Association of Cemeteries. Interesting comments on the regulations at the beginning of the meeting. We haven't seen the final draft after our comments were made. Hopefully we can see those soon, which will be great. However, based on the conversation at this board meeting today, I anticipate NYSAC will oppose the changes to the monument bidding regulations. And I have to say to the board that during this meeting, I received a number of notifications expressing deep concern about the fact that terms like collusion and other issues related to how these bids were submitted were being thrown around and reflecting quite badly on the industry. And I would also point out that on one of the applications, at least, the cemetery involved followed at what was directed at the last board meeting as to what they should do for advertising. And to one of the board members' comments about process not being followed, my concern with the proposed regulatory changes is the fact that it appears, depending on the meeting, that the process changes. And I think this is really unfortunate. We should be creating a partnership where the cemeteries can work with the division and the board to know exactly what they should be submitting to the board. And yes, there are going to be differences. There are going to be concerns associated with whatever specific transaction is being done. But when a cemetery follows direction and submits applications, there should be an understanding that they followed the process and that the process is not going to change at the next meeting. And, you know, I say this with all due respect, this has been an ongoing problem for a while. And cemeteries just need to understand what they need to do. You know, you're talking about a number of volunteer organizations, and they want to follow the process, but they have to know what the process is. And they've had conversations with their investigators, they've had conversations with the division, and then the applications come before the board, and it's a totally different situation. That's really concerning. I'm also concerned about the fact that there were a number of misstatements made about some of these cemeteries today that were mostly corrected. But I would just encourage folks, this is a public forum. It's recorded, it's available. People watch these things. Making statements that are inaccurate, that reflect badly on organizations and the board members that represent those organizations does have an impact. And I say that with all due respect. We look forward to working with you and hope we can come together on something that will work, that will be clear and folks will be able to utilize to get their applications for these important monument restoration programs done. Thank you very much.
Is there anybody else that wants to speak to the board? Okay, so thank you for that, David. Appreciate your comments. And you did identify yourself, so that's good. So I don't think we need executive session. So I would say I'll make a motion to adjourn the meeting. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor? Aye, and thank you all for your participation.
Thank you.